Let's say that I have my Cartesian coordinate system, so my x and y axis, and let's say that I would like to draw a circle in this coordinate system. Well, there are a couple of questions I need to ask. First, where is it I want to have the center of the circle? Let's say that I want the circle to be centered at the origin, meaning here right in the middle is going to be my center. Now, what is the coordinate of that point? The coordinate of that point is 0, 0, right? Because x is 0 and y is 0. So my circle, I want it to be centered at 0, 0. The next question that I want to ask is, well, how long is the radius? Let's say that I want my radius to have length of, let's say, 4 units. Then how am I going to go about drawing this? Well, from the center, I'm going to count 4 units in each direction. So let's say here is 4, 4, so 4, 4, right? So if I'm counting 4 units, that means that I can actually know exactly what the coordinates of those points are. So if I'm counting 4 units to the right, then the coordinate of that point is 4, 0. So let me go ahead and actually write that. So 4, 0. If I'm counting 4 up, that's going to be 0, 4. If I'm counting 4 units to the left, that's going to be negative 4, 0. And then 4 units down, that's going to be 0, negative 4. Now, this is only on the axis, but of course I could count 4 units distance away from my center in any direction, right? So when I do that, when I count that equilateral distance, right, the same 4 units away from 0, I'm going to create a pretty close version of my circle. So that's what a circle is. Once you have a point, if you maintain the same equal distance and move around that point, then you're going to create a circle. So this circle over here, for me, it is centered where? It is centered at 0, 0, and it has a radius of 4. That's just an example of this one particular circle. In general, the equation of any circle can be represented with this expression here. X minus h squared, y minus k squared equals to r. This is the equation that represents a circle that's centered at some numbers h, k, right? This is the x coordinate, this is the y coordinate of where the circle is centered. In our previous example, my circle was centered at 0, 0, 0 for x, 0 for y, but because it's the center, we just call them h and k. And the length of the radius is r, this number over here. Again, in a previous example, that was a 4. So how do we recognize sort of what the circle is doing just by looking at an equation? Well, let's look at this first example A. We recognize the equation of a circle, but I would like to find out where is this circle centered and what is the length of the radius. Well, notice the h is the number in front of x and then minus something. So here's x minus, so my h would have to be this number 2. And then what about k? K is the number inside the parenthesis with y, that's the y coordinate, but again, it's the one that follows the minus, because that minus, it's part of the equation. So my k must be 1. And then what about r? Well, r is the number that is squared at the end, so that must be my 4. So then in this case, my circle is centered where? It is centered at 2, 1, and it has a radius of 4. Now what about the next example? In the next example, I've got, again, x minus, which is what I expected, and then whatever number is in there, that's my h. So my h is 3, but then what about my k? What you notice here is that I have y plus 5. Well, I know I need to have a minus in there. So what must be my k so that it forces my minus to become a plus? Well, k has to have been a negative 5, because the only way for me to get y plus 5 is really if I really had y minus 5, right? That's the only way to get that y plus 5. So my k actually has to be a negative 5, this guy over here, not just a positive 5. So then my center for part B is at 3, negative 5. And then let's go ahead and look at the radius. What is the radius? Well, the radius is whatever this number at the end is, that's the radius squared. So this number 36, that is r squared. So if r squared is 36, what must r be? Well, it has to be 6 because we would take the square root of both sides. We don't pay attention to the negative because r is a distance and it cannot be negative. But in this case, if I do square root the 36, r is going to end up being 6. So in my second case, the radius is 6. Let's look at part C. Again, we're going to pay attention to what my h is. So notice that this is a plus 2 over here, so my h has to be a negative 2. Now notice this for y, right, for k, this y is a plain y squared. So how do I know what my k is? Well, notice that y squared can be rewritten as y minus 0 squared. It's exactly the same thing. So then it looks like my k must be 0 and my h has to be negative 2. So then for part C, my circle is, the center is at negative 2 comma 0. And let's tackle the radius. So let's come back to the radius. Now it's telling us that this number over here is 17. Again, this entire number at the end, that's r squared. So in our case, r squared equals to 17. But we're not looking for r squared, we're looking for r, which means my r has to be plus and minus square root of 17. But we're going to, of course, ignore the negative because r is a positive value. So then in that case, the radius is square root of 17. In this example, we're going to do it backwards. What if we know the center and we know the radius, but we want to write the equation instead? Well, we know what the equation is, so here is our equation. All we need to find out is what the radius, what the center is and the radius, and just plug in. So let's go ahead and sort of write the shell. So I know my equation of a circle is going to be x and then minus something squared plus y minus something else squared equals to some radius squared. So some radius squared. All right, so now let's see if we can plug in things that we know. Well, we know that my h and k are my center, right? So where is my center? My center is at 2 and negative 1. So then the 2 is the x coordinate, negative 1 is the y coordinate. So here is my 2 and negative 1. And then I know that the radius has a length of 7. So the radius has a length of 7. So now we have our equation. It's just a matter of cleaning up. So then the equation becomes x minus 2 squared plus y plus 1 squared equals 2. You can write 49 or you can also write 7 squared. It would be the same thing. Let's look at part B. Let's see. If we write the shell, we've got x minus something squared plus y minus something else squared equals to some radius squared. So let's see what the problem gives me. The problem says my center is at 0, 0. So let's plug in those numbers, 0, 0. And then it's telling me that the radius is 4. So here is my radius of 4. So then if I actually simplify this a little bit, then I would get x squared plus y squared equals to 16, or you can also write it as x squared plus y squared equals to 4 squared as well. In this case, it's not easy to see what kind of a circle this is, where the circle is, or how big the radius is, because we don't have it in the nice sort of standard form that we had previously. But we can make this one, we can set this expression up into a much more straightforward form so that we can tell much more about the circle. But to do that, we're going to have to complete the square twice, because notice I'm having all these bits and pieces of x and then pieces of y, so I can actually use them to complete the square, but we're going to have to do that twice. So first, let's combine everything with an x together and everything without everything with a y together. So I've got x squared minus 4x, and then plus y squared minus 20y plus 68 equals to 0. So all I did is I literally just rearranged them a little bit so that all the x's are a little bit closer together and the y's are closer together. Now we're going to try to complete the square twice. So first I'm going to concentrate on the x over here. So if you remember, for me to be able to complete the square, I'm going to have to add something new to the equation, b over 2 squared. So here is my b, negative 4. Negative 4 over 2 is negative 2. Negative 2 squared is 4. So that's what I need to add in. So I'm going to have x squared minus 4x. I'm going to add the 4 in, but then immediately subtract it, because remember, we don't want to change the actual equation. Now this resulting 3 pieces, they're going to become a perfect square, and we're going to come back to that. Now let's tackle the y's. So here are my y's over here. Again, I want to add b over 2 squared. So my b is negative 20. Negative 20 over 2 is negative 10. Negative 10 squared is 100. So that tells me what to add. So I'm going to write plus y squared minus 20y, and now I know what I need to add. I need to add 100, but then immediately subtract it because I don't want to change my equation. And then don't forget about that 68 at the end. All right, so the beauty of this adding b over 2 squared is that the 3 pieces that result become perfect squares. So let's come back to the x1. This one becomes a perfect square. This is x minus 2 squared. And then don't forget, you still have the negative 4 over there, right? You still have the minus 4. And then plus the second parenthesis with y is a perfect square, y minus 10 squared. And again, you still have some negative 100 plus 68 remaining on that side. Now notice that it's already starting to look like an equation of a circle. So here's my perfect square, here's my second perfect square. All I need is some number on the other side to tell me what the length of the radius is. So we're going to move all these numbers to the right-hand side. So we're going to have x minus 2 squared plus y minus 10 squared equals 2, and I'm going to have minus 68 plus 100 plus 4. So I just moved all the numbers over. So that gives me the circle equation x minus 2 squared plus y minus 10 squared equals 36. Now this already is my equation of the circle. So then the problem was asking me to find the center and the radius. So just by looking at this form of the equation, now we can easily tell what the center and the circle is. So let's go ahead and write the answer. So the center is at h comma k, which is 2 comma 10, and the radius is the square root of that 36. So the radius is 6. We have another example, so let's go ahead and see what we have. We only have one x here, so there are no remaining pieces of x. So this x is already a perfect square. So let's go ahead and rewrite it already as x minus 0 squared. However, the y has some extra pieces over here. So for this one, we are going to have to complete the square. So let's go ahead and try to do that. So plus y squared plus 10y. So now I would like to add something new to this. So how do I know what to add to complete the square? You want to pay attention to b, right? This b over 2 squared. 10 divided by 2 is 5. 5 squared is 25. So we're going to add 25 and then immediately subtract it because we're trying to complete the square without changing the meaning of the equation. And once we have done that, these 3 pieces become a perfect square, and we will come back to that to show that. So then we don't want to forget about the remaining plus 21 equals to 0. All right, so my x is already taken care of. It's just x minus 0 squared, so that I can see that h a little bit better. So now my y's, that parenthesis becomes a perfect square. It becomes y plus 5 squared. And if you're not quite sure how that happens, all you need to think about is by factoring this out. So what happens when I factor this out? You're going to get y plus 5 times y plus 5, which is the same as y plus 5 squared. All right, so coming back to the numbers that we have left over, we have negative 25 plus 21. So it's starting to already look like the equation of a circle. So we just need to move the numbers to the other side. So x minus 0 squared plus y plus 5 squared equals to, let's see, I've got positive 25 minus 21. To clean it up a little, x minus 0 squared plus y plus 5 squared equals to 4. So now this is already the equation of our circle. It's straightforward to see what the center is. It's h comma k, and then the radius is the square root of that number over there, because that's r squared. So then let's go ahead and write the answer. So the center is where? It's at 0 comma negative 5, and then the radius is 2.